Welcome to our wrap-up review of the biggest, burliest bike in Yeti's lineup. This is the recently overhauled version of the SB165, brand new for 2024. Heaps of exciting things to talk about, and I'm back with this bike. Scotty's been riding it, trail testing it for a couple of months now. And so in this vid, we're gonna go for a deep dive into how it performs and who it's gonna suit best. All right, let's kick it off. Scotty, tell us a bit about the sort of main key figures and numbers that the SB165 hits.
Yeah, so this is, as you said, it's the biggest production bike in their lineup. You know, obviously we've seen on the World Cup circuit, they're currently working on a downhill bike at the moment, which isn't available. However, as far as like a big free ride slash enduro bike, this is their biggest bike. And as in the name, 165 out the back and 170 up the front. So a slight change to the last 165, which come with a 27.5 inch front wheel and a 180 fork. This comes with a 29 inch wheel and a 170 fork. So
it's a stock mullet, this bike now, yep. One of the big kind of additions to this year. Now, one thing I find really interesting about this bike, when you think about a long travel burly bike, this is the bike that the Yeti factory guys do Rampage on. We've seen triple clamp forks put on these bikes and race downhill on. Often it's easy for a brand to kind of go big and burly, which means that the frame itself gets chunkier and kind of just throw more parts on it or throw more material at it, yep, to get burly. Whereas it seems like Yeti's approach to this bike has been a lot more thought about. It's a real kind of minimalist approach.
Yeah, very, and that's like we've spoken about this a couple of times now. When we first got our hands on this and pulling it out of the box, it's extremely refined. So this bike's silhouette looks very similar to the model from yesteryear. However, there has been a ton of subtle changes and the bike is very refined. It's rather light for what it is. But with that said, ride's pretty good.
Well, ride's pretty good. Obviously that means it tracks really well. Tell us, yep, being a Yeti, of course it's got the Infinity link down there. Yep. How does that work? And then also, it's got quite an interesting linkage above that as well, yep, which drives the shock. Tell us a bit about what the kind of the design concept and then the execution, how it actually handles.
Yeah, so without getting into all the tech talk, if you check out our current issue of Revo magazine, we've gone into a ton of detail about the facts and figures on this bike. But as far as ride performance goes, just to not bore all you fans to death at home with all the technical talk, very, with the floating switch Infinity link, very good under braking, extremely smooth. At times when I was hitting very square edges on this bike, the actual rear end felt very bottomless, more akin to a downhill bike. But pedal performance as well for a big bike, like this thing, the stable platform with the switch Infinity as well, it's like remarkably good. Actually, even the first couple of times I rode this and we went and done some shuttle runs on this, I was actually spinning out actually how well this thing hugs the ground, the traction it generates to the rubber below, front and back end. Very balanced bike and extremely good pedal for a big bike.
There's one thing, 165 is a lot of travel, especially, yep, when you think in mullet with a big fork up there as well. Now you did mention if you're not vibing the 2.9 front wheel, you can put a 27.5 wheel on there, is that right?
Yeah, you can, like and a triple clamp like these are rated, so you're not going to void your warranty if you decide to invest in one of these and you want to chop and change the front end and maybe take it downhill racing as well. You can put a triple clamp on there or a 180 fork and swap it out for a 27.5 inch front wheel as well. So
talking of warranty as well, Yeti support this bike with a lifetime warranty, yep, no questions asked. So obviously, you know, it's a big investment. A Yeti is as high end as you can possibly get. So if you're going to be shelling all that cash, it's good to know, peace of mind that, you know, this thing's going to be covered no matter what you sort of throw at it. Mate, comes with a coil shock as well, which, yep, is interesting. Obviously a lot of long travel bikes finding these days coming with air, you know, and a lot of that, mm-hmm, is to get the overall weight of the bike down. This thing's coming with a coil, it's still crazy lightweight package. How does the coil shock make the bike kind of track and handle?
Yeah, I'm an extremely big fan of coil shocks. I run a coil shock in my regular enduro bike as well. I just find them very supple off the top, and for that reason they generate a lot of traction. With that said, there's some amazing air shocks on the market, so if you prefer an air shock because it's a bit lighter, a little bit more adjustability out on the trail, then sure, go with an air shock. But the best thing about these, especially on those bigger downhill runs as well, like the sensitivity of the shock remains and how the shock feels remains the same all the time. And I find that's probably the difference between an air shock and a coil shock is the coil shocks, when they get a little bit hotter, do tend to change a little bit. I mean, now, you know, slightly, but that's the cool thing about a coil. They remain very, very sort of consistent, you know, over the trails all the time.
So especially you take this thing down to something like a Threadbow or a Medina, you're doing big long runs, it's going to be consistent top to bottom, right?
Correct. Yeah, and that's the best thing about it. So, I mean, you look at this bike, and just like you touched on before with the lifetime warranty, and when you see one of these in the flesh, like, you know where your money's going. Like, these things like look so good. The attention to detail with these things is absolutely crazy. Like, if you want you know, a serious bit of bike porn, then these things should be on your bucket list.
Oh, Yetis, mate.
100%.
No one's doing a better job right now. We've obviously tested quite a few of the Yeti's current lineup. This is obviously the latest bike they've launched. Let's talk about, obviously we mentioned this is the longest travel bike they've got. They're not going after the downhill market. It's probably a bit more for the enduro. It's a lot of bike. Where does it kind of fit in, and what kind of rider is it going to suit, would you say?
Yeah, again, like this is exactly the style of bike that I like to ride a lot of the time, considering our local trails where we ride. I know we've said that in heaps of reviews, but, you know, very steep, very rough, very fast, a lot of big jumps, you know. So as far as handling the heavier terrain and those aggressive elements of mountain bike riding, this thing has got all those, you know, bases covered. It ticks all the boxes. But with that said, like, with that Switch Infinity Link and how light this thing is, it pedals unreal. Like, this thing climbs so good. It's probably the best climbing bike in this travel range that I've had for a very long time. Mate, it's that good. I wouldn't be surprised if some enduro races actually went with the 165 rather than the 150 or the 160.
Because there's no weight penalty, it still pedals.
Nah, and like, that's one thing with the bike as well. When I got it, it is very light depending on what size you get. And I was like, you know, when you're getting a very like lighter, longer travel bike, you sometimes have a bit of concern about how well it's going to, or how stable it's going to be over that chunky, like fast, rough stuff. But for a light bike that pedals really good, that was probably the most surprising thing, is actually how well a lighter enduro bike tracked and handled all those super fast sections. Inspired super confident riding. And I know I've said this before, and I know the guys from Yeti Australia won't mind me saying this, but this is one I want to keep. Like, this thing is that good, and yeah, it looks amazing. So,
ticks all the boxes,
mate. It's really good. I mean, I go into a ton more detail about how much fun this bike is to ride, but if you're considering one and you decide to get one, trust me when I say you won't be disappointed.
The SB165 available in a bunch of different frame sizes at the Yeti dealers nationwide across Australia right now. Definitely a bike to put on your shopping list if you're feeling like treating yourself and you're up for some big gravity riding. Mate, that's our wrap-up review. If you like our video, be sure to give it a like. Anything else you'd like to know, pop it in the comment section below. Get our channel a subscribe, and expect plenty more content coming your way in future.